Good morning to everyone. My name is George Baroutas, and I'm working for Praxis Network based in Greece. I'm a national contact point for secure societies, and I'm happy to moderate the third webinar organized by our project with focus on dual-use technologies and EU funding opportunities. This webinar is open equally to national contact points in secure societies and Enterprise Europe Network advisors. As far as I can see, there is both interest. Many of you are national contact points, but there is also a big participation rate from Enterprise Europe Network. We selected this topic because actually at this moment dual use, it's not a buzzword, but it's a word with a higher interest if you compare it with what was happening 2 or 3 or 5 years before. So I think that as security national contact points, but also as EN advisors, it is good to know more about this issue. And we're really happy having with us today Mr. Paul Ansou, who is a policy officer working for defense industry in DG GROW and European Commission. He's going to give us a presentation about dual-use technologies and how they are handled by the European Commission, what are some of the opportunities that can be found in the field. The procedure is going to be like the following one. There will be the presentation. Everyone will be muted during this presentation, and after that I'm going to open a Q&A session. This means that you can write down your question and Mr. Ansou will answer to them, and of course we can also come back to you if you need more details and so on. Last but not least, this webinar is going to be recorded and it will be uploaded in the SEREN3 website. You can Google it and you can find it if you don't know which is the web address. So I go on with the presentation of uploading the presentation of Mr. Ansou, and Mr. Ansou, you can begin your presentation. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, George, for the kind introduction. So I am indeed Paul Ansou, working for the European Commission in DG GROW, in a unit that deals with the defense industry, but also the aeronautics and the maritime industries. So basically, it's my job today to inform you a little bit more about the EU funding opportunities that exist regarding dual use and dual use technologies. I'm just checking the slide here. Okay. The structure of my presentation will be the following. I will give you a short introduction on the policy context. Why are we talking today, in fact, about dual use? Then I will give you some examples and more information on what that can mean in the context of Horizon 2020, before also highlighting possibilities under the European structural funds, the COSME program, and also some other actions and initiatives that are related. So basically, for many of you, it's maybe new that the Commission is becoming increasingly active in a sector that is the defense sector. Defense is obviously a sector that is primarily the competence and the responsibility of the member states, but we think that the Commission can make a contribution, and actually defense has become a priority of President Juncker and this Commission. Now, this became a little bit more concrete when last November the Commission adopted the so-called European Defence Action Plan, and a lot of what I will be telling you today comes back to what is written in this action plan. this action plan sort of outlines how can EU policies and instruments support European defense industry, but also how can we have more collaboration between the member states. And the action plan has three main pillars. The first one is about launching the European Defense Fund. And I think the big novelty here is that we are working towards a defense research program in the period post-2020, so after Horizon 2020. It's also about fostering investments in defense supply chains, and this is basically a lot about access to EU funding for SMEs. And the third pillar is more about a single market for defense, because the Commission has two directives in the area of defense. One is dealing with procurement, and one is dealing with the transfer of defense goods within the EU. Now, I will focus specifically on all the actions that are more related to the second pillar, because here we are talking about access to COSME, to the structural funds. We also want to encourage more regional clusters of excellence in this area, and there are also some actions in support of skills in the defense sector. Now, why are we focusing on dual use? I'm coming to that in a minute, but first maybe what is dual use? What do we understand with dual use in this particular context? And what you see on the screen is a very basic, very generic definition. Dual use is about products, services, and technologies that can meet the needs of both defense and civil communities. This is also reflected in the dual use guide that is available online as well as in printed versions. So this is not to be confused with the kind of dual use definition that you will find, for example, in the dual use export regulation, because there dual use is much more in a context of weapons of mass destruction, and that's certainly not the idea here. I want to give you just a couple of examples to show you what could be these type of dual-use products and technologies that we have in mind. Here's the first example that you will probably recognize very well, smart textiles, also called e-textiles. Basically, these are the textiles that can adapt to different circumstances. They have embedded computing, they have digital components, energy systems, etc. And you see increasingly applications in sectors like sports and fitness, healthcare, automotive, but also protection and defense. Mine rescuers, firefighters, soldiers, they can all appreciate clothing that is actually measuring vital life signs. It can also be a software application. This is an example of what is called motion capture technology. And in very basic terms, it is indeed turning two-dimensional images into a three-dimensional world. And we're all very much familiar with the day-to-day applications. Your 3D movies in the cinema, the computer games, but there are also some medical applications, and it's also becoming more and more important for the defense world, because there it allows to carry out simulations in a safe environment. And then a third example is the one of exoskeletons. Exoskeletons are kind of a Robocop type of suits, but that can actually help disabled people to walk again, but also help firefighters, nurses, and soldiers to carry heavy loads. And actually, since a couple of days, there is a great example that you can see, so a clip of only 3 minutes at euronews.com, which gives the example of an Italian SME that is exactly in the business of producing this type of technology. And they are making use, by the way, of the Horizon 2020 SME Instrument, on which I will say also a few words later on. Now, why are we indeed also focusing on dual use when we talk about our defense policy and our defense actions? Well, there are a number of reasons for that. Basically, if you talk about sort of defense-related companies in Europe today, virtually all of them, there are always exceptions, of course, but virtually all of them do have civil sales and military sales. They have civil clients and military clients. On top of that, if you look at the history, a lot of the day-to-day applications that we know very well today find their origin in military research. This is the case for GPS, this is the case for internet, even your microwave oven in the kitchen, or the airbag in the car, all have some origins in military research. But nowadays, it's increasingly the reverse trend that is becoming more and more important. At the same time, you see really a growing number of fields where you can identify multiple applications. This is valid for nanoelectronics, big data, 3D printing, etc. And fourthly, there is a sort of economic argument. If you look at dual use in the European economy, that is quite an important share. A lot of our intra-EU trade, up to 20%, is dual use related. And also, as you can see on the screen, this is the case for our trade with non-EU countries. And there is also maybe a reason that is not mentioned on the screen, and that is that many of our EU funding tools today are maybe a bit difficult to use when you have projects that are purely defense-oriented, but they do have possibilities when it comes to dual use, and that's exactly, of course, the topic of today. Now I will highlight a little bit more in some detail some of the funding opportunities under Horizon 2020. Most of you are, of course, very much familiar with the three key priorities, and I think in terms of dual use potential under Horizon 2020, probably there are two that are the most relevant. One is, of course, secure societal challenges, because there you have secure societies, so protecting the freedom of Europe and its citizens, that is quite important from a dual use perspective. But also if you turn to industrial leadership, there are a lot of actions there, a lot of areas there, which could potentially have a very interesting dual use potential. This is certainly the case when you talk about nanotechnologies, advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, etc. Now, if we talk about Horizon 2020, as you probably know very well, it does have an exclusive focus on civil applications. This is clearly said in Article 19 of the Horizon 2020 regulation. However, it doesn't mean that you can't fund dual-use technologies in your projects. It's actually quite possible. Here, dual use is seen, however, in a context of the dual-use export regulation. So if you want to see what dual use might, if you have a dual-use technology in mind that could be the subject of a certain project, you would have to check with the dual-use export regulation on whether that would be covered there or not. But there's actually a quite helpful note. It's only a 2-pager that was prepared by our colleagues from DG Research on what exactly does it mean, dual use and Horizon 2020. You can see the link on your screen. These are just a couple of examples under the 7th Framework program where you can identify topics of projects that clearly have dual use relevance. One of it, called Antibot-Ape, is about developing medicines that are protecting EU citizens but also soldiers in case of bioterrorist attacks. Or you have the Tiramisu project, for instance, which presents a certain toolbox that can help for demining operations. But it can also be found in other sectors like health research. If you look at the field of key enabling technologies, then definitely there is a high dual-use potential. Here we're talking about areas such as nanotechnologies, advanced materials, photonics, etc. And there are plenty of examples that can be identified of such dual-use relevance. For example, if you look at the gallium nitrate that is used in semiconductors, it already used to be the case that this was very useful to produce your PlayStations, the Blu-ray technology, but increasingly this is also now being used for defense applications. For example, to make military radars more performant. And this is another individual example of such a case. Here you see how cadmium tellurium cells are being used both in the production of demining robots, but also to produce medical imagery, in particular scanners. In fact, this potential was recognized already by a high-level group on key enabling technologies in 2015, and they said we should fully exploit the dual-use potential of key enabling technologies and also try to boost applications in the Horizon 2020 programs. And actually, since a few months, there is a very interesting study now available free of charge, which identifies different innovation fields with significant dual-use potential and related technologies, and it can help us policymakers to take further steps. What are these kind of innovation fields? Well, for example, it's identifying the field of human assistance and robotics, and then goes into a little bit more detail where robots for medical interventions and rehabilitation are mentioned, robotic devices for search and rescue, etc., etc. And this is done for other fields as well, such as cybersecurity or energy for mobility, for example. I already made a reference to a project of an Italian SME proposed under the Horizon 2020 SME Instrument. It's actually a quite interesting instrument for SMEs, in my view, when it comes to dual use. Total budget of this instrument is close to 3 billion euros for the period up until 2020. And it's basically there to support SMEs to go from an idea to the market. So we're talking about TRLs, technological readiness level 6 to 9. It has 3 distinct phases. The first phase is supporting the validation of what is a radically new business idea with 50,000 euros for those presenting an ambitious initial plan, and then they can use the money to investigate technical and economic feasibility. There is a second phase where the grant is ranging from 500,000 euros to up to 2.5 million euro to support more research, development, and demonstration activities that would be needed to realize the business plan. And in a final phase, then we're not talking about a grant, but there is actually some business coaching support to help access clients and potential investors across Europe. As I said, it's very interesting from a dual-use perspective because it's open for all types of innovative SMEs. There is one single permanently open call, and you have a range of different call topics. And what makes it interesting from my point of view as well is, of course, that you can have one single company applying for funding. Now, I want to turn to another major source of funding in Europe, which is European structural and investment funds. The European Defence Action Plan makes some important statements about the structural funds in this context. It clearly says that the structural funds can be used in the defense sector, but obviously it has to contribute in the first place to the objectives of the fund. If I can put it in other words, the question is, if you have an investment project under the structural funds, is it going to strengthen economic, social, and territorial cohesion? That has to be the first priority. It also specifically says about European Regional Development Fund that it can fund dual-use activities in research and innovation, but also defense activities, although it has to be part of a smart specialization strategy. And as you may know, a smart specialization strategy is a precondition to get funding from European structural investment funds. Now, what are we going to do from our side is to promote this type of funding opportunities, which are probably new to many people, and in particular to the managing authorities, because, as you know, structural funds is a very decentralized program, and the managing authorities have a very important role to play. They are setting the specifications of the investment calls. They're also carrying out the selection process. So we're going from our side to prepare a guidance paper, which should be ready before summer, to have more information to member states and managing authorities about what it means using structural funds in an area of defense. This is also why last year we launched the so-called European Network of Defense-Related Actions. It's actually trying to bring together regional organizations, authorities, and clusters and offer them a platform where they can share some experiences and best practices on how to develop, for example, dual-use strategies, also smart specialization strategies, because we've seen that things are evolving in this area. Just to give you one example, Croatia is probably the first one that actually included a dual-use priority into their smart specialization strategy. And we want to share this type of innovative policy developments among the different regions. At the same time, we want to offer a platform where you can find more information on access to funding in this area at the EU level. And also some events are being organized together with different regions. This is a screenshot of our main vehicle, which is the website of the network. And in fact, I think it's a great possibility for all regions that have an interest to increase their visibility share their best practices, and exchange some information also on the events that they are organizing. So I'm always inviting clusters, regions to join the process. It's very easy. It's free of charge. They can upload their profile, post information on their dual use or defense-related events, and even use the website to look for partners in European projects. But even if you're not a region or regional organization or cluster, I think there's a lot of useful information, and you also have the possibility to register, to sign up for the quarterly newsletter. As I said, we are also organizing a lot of events under this platform together with the regions. We already had, for example, one on cybersecurity in France last year. And the two upcoming are one in Southampton next week, a Maritime and Defense Dual Use Conference, which will really deal with topics like marine autonomous systems and satellite applications in the maritime sector. And there will be one in Denmark early May, and they have selected the themes of drones and space, which is very important from their regional perspective. I want to stress 2 points. First of all, the events are organized by the Commission, but together with the regions, but they are open to business, clusters, regional authorities, not only obviously of the country where it is taking place, but we are looking for cooperation, for participation from the other regions in Europe as well. The second point I want to stress is that the Enterprise Europe Network is facilitating the B2B activities in all these events. So B2B opportunities for SMEs and other companies and stakeholders, usually taking place on the second day of such event. Now, in terms of the way forward of this network, there will be specific workshop for ENDR members in October, and the idea is to start looking forward what could be possible activities of this network, how can we strengthen it, make it more user-friendly, etc. And we hope that we will be able to secure some funding under the COSME program to continue the activities for period 2018-2019. And that actually brings me then indeed to the COSME program. COSME program, as you know, the program at European level for the competitiveness of SMEs. And basically, of course, 60% of the financial means of the COSME program are going to the financial instruments. So basically, we're talking here about the loan guarantee facility and the equity facility for growth that is available for SMEs. Now, here the situation is that this type of money is not provided directly by the European Commission to the SMEs. It's going via financial intermediaries. And it involves the European Investment Bank, European investment funds, and they may apply some restrictive policies where it comes to defense industry. However, when it comes to sort of dual use companies that both have civil clients, defense clients, they will judge whether they can grant a loan guarantee on a case-by-case basis. That's the situation at the moment. But COSME is also there to help with access to markets, to help with internationalization. And this also applies to support to cluster and cluster internationalization. I'll just give you one example. It's a call that has recently been opened, the Cluster Go International call, which is supporting clusters that come together and form a strategic cluster partnership to do business with countries outside of the European Union. And what is very interesting, there is also going to be a very specific call dedicated to this type of partnerships, but specifically in the area of dual use. And we expect that this call will be launched in the third quarter of this year. And of course, there is the Enterprise Europe network, and I understand many involved in this network are listening today. And I want to mention it, first of all, because it's co-funded under the COSME program, but it's not always known that companies that, for example, are developing dual-use activities can turn to the EN for support. EN is very interesting for SMEs because they can get free of charge information on EU legislation, access to funding, matchmaking, etc. And last year, all the EN partners were informed that they can indeed also provide services in the area of dual use. The only constraint that I'm aware of is that when we talk about the partnership opportunities database, there is a constraint. They cannot, or it is not allowed to upload a purely military profile on this database. Apart from that constraint, I think there are lots of possibilities that are useful and relevant in a dual-use context. Now, the EN, in my view, two main strengths that it can also offer to SMEs is, on the one hand, because there are more than 600 partners in more than 60 countries, it's really, there is no obstacle to get to an EN partner close by. There are usually more than one EN partners in each member state. At the same time, you can see that the EN is present in lots of countries outside of the EU, so definitely they can help with the internationalization aspect of the company. I also want to mention that besides the partners, there are 17 sectoral groups active in the EN, and one group in particular, the sectoral group Aeronautics and Space, now also has dual-use technologies in its title, and it's really very active in this area. And I just always recommend companies, for example, if they have something in mind, like a matchmaking event, a B2B event, that clearly has kind of a dual-use angle to it, don't hesitate in contacting also, if needed, the people of the sectoral group, and they can turn in first instance to the Aeronautics, Space and Dual-Use Technologies group, but of course it may also be relevant to go to the sectoral group responsible for ICT or the maritime sector, because they're also very much aware of what is possible in the area of dual use. Now, basically, when talking to SMEs, very often I have the impression that many of them still sort of refrain from trying to go to EU funding because they say, well, we think it's not possible, or we will get a negative reply anyway, so we will not bother. So we're trying to sort of change the mentality and point at the possibilities that exist now. So what we want to do is to develop some brochures which hopefully should really be very light reading. We just want to showcase some SMEs that successfully managed to secure EU funding for their dual-use projects. So simply showing that it is possible. And we hope that the brochures and also a video will be ready by summer, and then it will be made available via the Enterprise Europe network. The brochure will be available, I think, in 7 different languages. Now, one of the final actions or fields that I want to highlight is the area of skills, where in the European Defence Action Plan that was adopted last year, the Commission said it was going to support the setting up of an industry-led European defence skills partnerships, that we should adopt a sector skills strategy and try to support the implementation of really solutions for this sector. And it's here that, let's say, the European skills policy comes together with European defense industry policy, because we are taking advantage of the new skills agenda for Europe that was launched last year, and which announced a blueprint for sectoral cooperation on skills. And here defense has been selected as one of the 6 pilot sectors. And the implementation of this action will go via 2 specific calls. One is a call to set up a sector skill alliance, and this will in this case obviously be a defense sector skill alliance under the Erasmus Plus program. So where the expectation is that we will get an industry-led European defense skills partnership, and that would work on very practical solutions to some of the skill gaps and skill problems that are existing in that sector. It's a call for proposals, budget €4 million over 4 years, and the call is still open until the 2nd of May, and you can find it if you go to the link mentioned below the screen. This will be complemented with a COSME project that is going to be launched either next month or by the latest in May. And here the idea is to complete more our knowledge on skills gaps and skills data. So it's a call for tender, budget €800,000, and it will feed into the first project under the Erasmus Plus program. Eventually, everything goes well. We also hope that there will be a kind of a rollout at national level, that we will see also partnerships at the national level, for which possibly the European structural investment funds could be used in support. So this is what I wanted to say, to give you an overview of some new possibilities. There are also more actions coming up that will be even more defense-specific in the future. Those were announced in European Defense Action Plan. And here are some further links where you can find even more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting, I think. So far, I think that we have a good number of attendees, and I suppose that there are a lot of questions, or there are some questions. I will open the Q&A section I was telling you before. So for those who are interested in making a question to Paul, he or she, they can write it down, and we can go on. So you can write it down. Okay, Paul, I think that you can see the question coming from Josephine.
Yes, George, I can see it. Would you like me to reply orally, or?
Since the webinar is recorded, you can reply orally. Okay.
Okay.
And I will just write down that this question has been answered, so that we can check it.
Okay, very well. So I'll first have a look here at Josephine's question about the synergy between future defense research program and the dual use part of the framework program. Well, actually, there are indeed maybe sort of two timelines that you can distinguish, because currently, as you know very well, you still have the Horizon 2020 program with sort of a focus on civil applications, but as I demonstrated, it doesn't mean that you cannot fund dual-use technologies, and you're sort of making this known and explaining this. At the same time, through a preparatory action on defense research, we're also paving the way for a fully fledged defense research program at the European level following the 2020 period, so going from 2021 till 2027. Now, at this stage, it is not known, will this defense research program be a part of, let's say, the next Horizon 2020 program, if I can call it like that, or will it be outside, but also obviously at European level? This is one of the things that need to be explored and examined. And also the preparatory action, so the first phase that is now already underway, will help us to build the next phase. I hope I answered that question. Then I take the next one from Maite, how to join the ENDR network. It's actually a very simple process. So the ENDR is open to cluster organizations, to regional development organizations, innovation agencies, etc. We're quite flexible in that respect. And you just go to the website and you click on Join ENDR. You will have to fill in a couple of questions, and then you will get a confirmation that you are on board, and you will have a profile that will be visible to anyone, explaining sort of what you are doing in your region in this area. I think to some extent, I also replied then the next question from Megas that indeed it is open to different stakeholders. Basically, as I said, our first target group is, of course, regional development agencies, the innovation agencies, and the clusters. Ministry of Defense, we would have to look into whether that is possible. The basic sort of idea behind our membership is that it should be players, it should be organizations that somehow have an interest or are involved in developing regional strategies, regional development strategies, and smart specialization strategies. As to the geographical element, in principle, it's for EU 28. Yeah, definitely, I would welcome, it's the next question, I would welcome the encouragement of other regional clusters to join in. Why? Because first of all, it's a very easy process. There is no commitment, no charges in terms of sort of financial contributions. And secondly, it does give your region visibility and really an opportunity to interact with other regions in this area. Then there is a question of Martin regarding the Erasmus Plus call, the dual-use technologies. Actually, you have a very fair point there in the sense that the content of the Erasmus Plus call that I mentioned is really about skills in the defense sector. So there may be a dual-use aspect in this. Why? Because if you look at skills needed for the defense sector, it's in most of the cases we're talking about skills that are sort of needed both by civil and defense companies, in the sense that there are not that many skills that are purely 100% defense specific. So the call will probably cover that as well. But it is true that the skills call that I mentioned is maybe a bit more specific to the defense sector and is a bit less about dual-use technologies. So I think I've covered the questions. If not, feel free to come back with a follow-up question.
Yes, indeed. If there are not other questions, okay, I think that there is one question coming from Thomas, right? Paul, can you see this question?
I don't see it. Let me.
Yes.
Okay, now, yes, yeah. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for your question, Thomas. Well, I think for me, unfortunately, it would not be possible to get in touch with every single SME in Europe that would have an interest in sort of proposing a dual-use project. That I cannot do. But I think what we want to do is to work a lot with intermediaries. This is exactly why we are informing cluster organizations about the possibilities, why we're informing regional organizations, because they do have the means to get in touch with SMEs, or vice versa, SMEs can turn to them. And this is also why we want to use the EN partners and EN sectoral groups. I mean, I hope that SMEs with specific questions and about dual use, they will turn in first instance to these intermediaries and get some help there. That's basically one of the main drivers of our campaign.
The next two questions coming from Mate, I think, are more or less the same. It's one question, and it is related with export regulations of defense-related technologies.
Okay. Yes.
And how it applies. Yeah.
Okay. There is indeed an EU export regulation on dual use of 2009, and very recently the Commission made a proposal to simplify the rules on the one hand, and on the other hand, to also cover technologies, especially in the area of IT, where there could be a possible abuse by third parties. So this is now a proposal which is submitted to the European Parliament and European Council. And the reason that I mentioned indeed this regulation is, of course, that it plays a role, for example, in your Horizon 2020 project. As I said, the definition of dual use in this regulation is a bit different and a bit more complex than the sort of very generic definition we are using from our policy perspective, because in the regulation, they will look at to what extent may your technology or your product, for example, be used to produce weapons of mass destruction. I will give you a very concrete example. I recently met somebody who was in the business of producing fertilizers, and I was asking him why is he following a dual-use conference, because surely he's not producing for the military. And he said, no, I'm not, of course, but I am covered by this regulation because my fertilizers can be used to produce chemical weapons. So this is just to show you that this regulation is covering some products and technologies that are maybe not exactly the kind of technologies we have in mind. But in your Horizon 2020 project, in your application, they will check if you are using, for example, dual-use technologies, which may imply also a transfer of knowledge to a third country. They will ask you, but does your project then also comply with the export regulation? Because you may need an export certificate. And what will you do if you will not get that certificate? What are the implications for your project? So they will ask you some questions to make sure you fully comply with that regulation. I always recommend, if you have very specific questions for your specific project and the export regulation, don't hesitate to get in touch with your national authorities that are responsible for the export regulation. And you can find, I think, a list on the website of my colleagues from DigiTrade. How does it apply to the security research projects? Well, it's more or less what I explained, because security research is covered under Horizon 2020 for that matter.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I don't think that there is another question from the audience. So far, we have answered all of the questions that were submitted by your side. So at this moment, I would like to thank all of you for participating in this webinar. I will, before the closure of this webinar, I would like to share with you a feedback which is attached in the content. Let me share this with you. Just a moment. And it will not take more than 5 minutes to fill in the requested details. In just a moment, because it's going to be uploaded first. And to give us your feedback for this webinar, for the content, for the technicalities, and for everything that maybe we can improve for the next time. It is a Google poll, so it's quite easy to fill in. I'm going to give you in a while the link. And of course, as I told you before, we are going to, okay, I think that I can share now the link with you. And of course, we will upload the recorded webinar in our website, which is indicated in the second link in this slide. So, thank you very much, Paul, for your really valuable presentation. It was a pleasure to having you in this webinar. I hope that everything worked well from your side. And thanks to all of you for participating and making these questions, which were very interesting to be answered by our side, by Paul's side. The next webinar is going to take place in due time. We are going to announce it through the SEREN3 website, but also via email. And I hope from my side, very nice weekend to all of you. Paul, again, thank you very much.
Thank you and have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.